Emera, on Elara's 5th birthday, what did Octavia say? And what did you realize about how one sentence can edit a child's reality?
Octavia Larkspur leaned over the cake like she was blessing it and said, "Happy birthday, honey. Even though you're not my real grandchild because you were made in a lab, I still love you." The room went quiet in that way adults pretend is manners. Elara asked what it meant, and Octavia explained it like a lesson. Real babies happen when parents love each other, not in a doctor's office. My daughter's face folded. She cried for hours later, asking if she was fake, if we didn't love each other, if that was why Grandma brought no gift. Caius stood there, silent. Later he said he didn't want a scene, but the scene had already moved inside our child, and that's the kind you can't clap away.
Before we go further, because people love judging IVF from a distance, what did the road to Elara look like, and why did Octavia know exactly where to aim?
IVF wasn't a trend for us. It was the choice we made after everything else failed. Caius and I tried for 7 years. I had 3 miscarriages, 3 tiny lives, 3 collapses, 3 versions of me learning how hope can bruise. We went through 4 IVF cycles that didn't work. By the time Elara arrived, we'd spent about $90,000. But money wasn't the worst part, my body was. Months of injections, procedures that left me weak, and surgeries that made me feel like my skin belonged to someone else. Octavia knew every detail. She saw bruises at holidays. She watched us cry, watched us almost give up, watched us keep going. So when she called Elara a lab child, it wasn't ignorance. It was precision, aimed at the tenderest place.
After Elara was born, people expect the grandma heart to magically turn on. What did Octavia do that proved the birthday wasn't a slip, it was a pattern?
I truly believed a baby might soften her. Instead, Octavia stayed distant with excuses that sounded reasonable until you stacked them. Too tired, too busy, too far. Yet she drove 2 hours almost every weekend to see Evander Brackenridge's kids. She posted pumpkin patches, matching pajamas, birthday hats, calling them her precious angels like she was building a shrine. Elara wasn't in a single picture. When we brought Elara home in Harrowfen, Octavia visited once and left early. After that, she vanished from milestones and acted like Elara existed only on paper. Every family comment carried the same omission. It's strange how neglect can be loud when it's selective, how a child can feel absence like a spotlight. The birthday sentence didn't come from nowhere, it came from years of rehearsal.
And after that birthday, what did gatherings look like? What was Elara forced to learn far too early in the middle of other people's nice?
I couldn't keep showing up and pretending nothing happened, so I stopped going. Caius still took Elara sometimes, alone, like my absence could be the compromise. Octavia would greet everyone, pass plates, and then look through Elara as if she were furniture. The other grandkids got toys and candy right in front of her, bright wrappers crinkling like applause. Octavia praised them in full sentences, smart, special, gifted. Elara sat quiet, hands folded, acting like she didn't care. A 5-year-old learns quickly when she's expected to swallow disappointment to keep adults comfortable. Caius came home saying his mom didn't mean it, but Elara's eyes told the truth. She was learning her place was off to the side, and that lesson, once learned, tries to become permanent.
Let's talk about Caius, because keeping the peace can quietly become a family religion. How did he react, and how did it change your home?
Caius reached for explanations because they felt safer than confrontation. He called Octavia old-fashioned. He said she'd come around. He told me I was too sensitive. I refused to argue in front of Elara. I wouldn't teach her that love is something you negotiate for. So I swallowed my rage and built what I could control. Routine, warmth, a home where she belonged without earning it. But the tension stayed. Caius treated his mother's cruelty like weather, unpleasant, unavoidable, easier to endure than to challenge. I learned peace often means the smallest person pays quietly. Elara was that person, and I couldn't accept a family script that required her silence. In our house, the quiet wasn't calm, it was avoidance, and avoidance always sends the bill to the child.
When you decided, fine, If the world won't protect her, I will. What did you pour into Elara's life, and what did you still see underneath her success?
I poured my energy into places that welcomed her without conditions. Dance classes taught her posture and pride. Art lessons gave her room to feel without apology. Science camps praised her curiosity instead of questioning her legitimacy. She thrived, spelling bees, friends, whole stretches where she forgot Octavia existed. That was the victory and the heartbreak. Elara adapted. She grew skin thick enough to keep moving. But thick skin isn't healing. It's a strategy. I'd still see a pause when someone mentioned grandma, like her mind checked a locked door before continuing. The wound didn't bleed daily, but it stayed ready. So I kept building a life that told her she was real, wanted, and safe. And I promised myself, her realness would never be up for debate inside my home.
Stability isn't a vibe, it's deposits, routines, and 1,000 quiet decisions. How did you rebuild stability, and what did Elara's silence start to mean?
I went back to work and let competence steady me. I'm a pediatric nurse. I worked up to charge nurse, then supervisor. I saved more than I spent and built Elara's college fund like a promise made in deposits. Caius and I bought a bigger house in a good Harrowfen school district. Octavia never came to see it. She never asked for the address like it mattered. Years passed and Elara stopped asking why she was treated differently, not because it stopped hurting, but because asking didn't change anything. Children don't stop wanting love. They stop expecting it. That shift is its own loss, and I carried it like a stone, even while Elara looked like she was thriving. Silence in a child can look like maturity. Sometimes it's just surrender with good manners.
Who became Elara's real grandparents, and how did that contrast sharpen what Octavia refused to give?
My parents did what Octavia wouldn't, quietly, without making a speech about it. Eulalie and Peregrine Vossendale flew in from Red Mesa, Arizona for holidays. They called every Sunday. They sent letters and small packages that proved they were listening, books Elara mentioned once, a planet charm because she loved astronomy. They never asked how she was conceived. They never hinted she was less real. Over time, Elara started calling them her grandparents without hesitation, and that contrast sharpened everything. It wasn't complicated to love her, it just required willingness. Octavia's refusal wasn't confusion, it was choice, repeated until it became a rule. I watched my daughter relax around my parents, no performance, no bracing. Love didn't interrogate her origin story, it just showed up. And that's when I stopped believing family is family as an excuse.
Years later, Octavia called needing full-time care. What did she say? And what alarm went off in you the moment she used certain words?
Caius wanted to fix it fast, like a check could erase history. He even tried to pull Elara in, said she'd want us to be kind. I told him, invite Octavia over. If she wanted help from our family, she could sit in our living room and face what she did to our child. I wasn't chasing revenge, I was demanding clarity. Revenge wants pain. Clarity wants truth to stay fixed when people tried to rewrite it. For years, Caius excused his mother because conflict scared him. Now conflict was at our door, asking for a price. I needed him to see the receipt of the past before he paid for her future. Otherwise, the conversation would be dishonest from the first breath. And dishonesty is how cycles survive. Polite, smiling, and deadly.
Before money was discussed, you insisted on one thing: invite her over. Why was that living room meeting non-negotiable?
Caius wanted to fix it fast, like a check could erase history. He even tried to pull Elara in, said she'd want us to be kind. I told him, invite Octavia over. If she wanted help from our family, she could sit in our living room and face what she did to our child. I wasn't chasing revenge, I was demanding clarity. Revenge wants pain. Clarity wants truth to stay fixed when people tried to rewrite it. For years, Caius excused his mother because conflict scared him. Now conflict was at our door, asking for a price. I needed him to see the receipt of the past before he paid for her future. Otherwise, the conversation would be dishonest from the first breath. And dishonesty is how cycles survive. Polite, smiling, and deadly.
When Octavia arrived, what did she do that proved she wasn't asking for help? She was assuming control?
Octavia walked in looking frail in a way that gathers sympathy before she speaks. She hugged Caius like she was reclaiming him, thanked him for being a good son, barely acknowledged me, and didn't ask about Elara. Then she launched into plans for Seacliff Haven residence in Cape Orem, ocean views, fancy dining, amenities, like she was reading a brochure aloud. She said she'd toured it, put down a deposit, and told them her son would be paying. No request, no apology, just assumption. I watched Caius's jaw tighten, that old reflex fighting between obligation and discomfort. Octavia didn't want a family discussion. She wanted a transaction where she kept the title and collected the benefit. I realized she wasn't coming to be accountable. She was coming to be crowned the victim with a down payment. And that kind of entitlement doesn't negotiate. It recruits.
Then 13-year-old Elara walked in. What shifted in the room, and what did you notice in your daughter's presence?
Elara came home from school with her backpack slipping off one shoulder, tall now, steady, quietly confident. She looked at Octavia the way you assess a stranger who wandered into the wrong house. Octavia tried to light up with warmth, the kind she turns on when she wants something, and started gushing about how big Elara had gotten, how pretty she was, how she had Caius's eyes. Elara didn't mirror it. She didn't flinch either. She just stood there taking in Octavia's tone, Caius's stiffness, my stillness. Her eyes met mine for a second, asking without words, "Are we safe?" I answered by staying calm. The power shifted, and Octavia felt it. For the first time, she was facing a child who no longer needed her approval to breathe, and I felt something strange and beautiful. My daughter was no longer auditioning for love.
What did Elara call Octavia, and why did that one choice of words hit harder than any argument?
Elara said politely, "Hello, Mrs. Larkspur." Not Grandma, not even a hesitant pause. Mrs. Larkspur, like a boundary spoken in plain English. Octavia's smile twitched, and I could see her recalculating in real time. She tried to recover by leaning into compliments, but Elara's face stayed neutral. Then my daughter turned to me and asked if she could go to a friend's house after school. She didn't ask Octavia. She didn't include her. I said yes, and Elara moved toward the door with the calm of someone who knows she has permission to leave discomfort behind. Octavia called after her, asking for a hug, voice suddenly small. That's when the air tightened, because the word Mrs. wasn't disrespect, it was accuracy, and accuracy is terrifying to people who live on entitlement.
Elara turned back, and instead of yelling, she did something colder. She repeated Octavia's own words. What did she say, and what happened to Octavia and Caius in that instant?
Elara turned slowly, like she was deciding whether Octavia deserved a response. Then she said, "I'm not your real grandchild, remember? I was made in a lab. No shouting, no extra cruelty, just the exact blade Octavia forged." Elara walked out. Octavia's face crumpled, and the tears that followed were real, shocked, raw, uncontrolled. Caius stood frozen, like he'd watched a door slam on the fantasy he'd been protecting. I didn't comfort Octavia. I reached for the folder I'd prepared because I knew this day would come. 8 years of small humiliations had led to one sentence, and my daughter delivered it without begging. I felt grief for the child she'd been, and pride for the girl who could finally leave first. She didn't ask permission. She simply walked away. And that's what boundaries look like when they finally grow teeth.
You had a folder ready because you weren't playing this on emotion alone. What was in it, and what did you tell Octavia when she started begging for money?
I handed Octavia the folder like a mirror. Inside were screenshots of family posts where Elara was missing, plus a timeline of skipped birthdays and holidays, dates, captions, patterns that add up to a verdict. 8 years of proof that grandmother was a role she refused to play. I also added a business card for the state Medicaid office and a list of facilities that accept it. Then I said, "We won't be paying for Seacliff Haven, and we won't fund the life she already promised herself." Octavia swung toward Caius, pleading, calling him her baby, insisting he couldn't let his wife do this. I didn't debate. Evidence doesn't need volume. She arrived acting like the past could be erased with a sad face. The folder made the past heavy in her hands. where it belonged, and I watched her realize tears don't erase receipts.
And Caius, your husband who'd lived inside silence, finally spoke. What did he say? And what did it do to the peace he'd been trained to protect?
Caius looked from me to Octavia like he was stepping off a cliff. Then he said, "You told our daughter she wasn't real. You broke her heart when she was 5. Octavia opened her mouth, but he kept going. "Why should we fix yours now that you're 70? She froze, hands gripping the couch, tears sliding onto her blouse. Caius stared at the carpet, jaw tight, like the words had to fight through years of obedience. I didn't feel joy. I felt relief, cold, clean relief, that the truth finally had a voice. For years, Caius used silence to keep peace. In that moment, he used truth to end the cycle. Octavia had no script for accountability, only tears and the realization that charm doesn't erase damage. And I saw the real battle, not mother versus wife, but son versus training.
You ended the meeting, and the door became a symbol. What did you do? And what did Caius do at the door that told you he'd chosen a side?
I stood and told Octavia it was time to leave. My voice stayed calm. Octavia looked at Caius, begging him to save her, and he didn't. After a pause, he walked to the door, opened it, and waited. No arm offered, no soothing words, just an exit. Octavia pushed herself up, legs shaking, and walked past him, crying. Caius closed the door behind her. We stayed in the living room, sitting where we'd been, like it was final. Later, Caius said he should have defended Elara at that 5th birthday. He called himself a coward. I didn't rush to forgive him, but I heard what mattered. He wasn't defending Octavia anymore. He was naming the damage, taking it back from our daughter's shoulders, and letting it belong to the adults who made it. That's what choosing a side looks like, not speeches, behavior.
When Elara came home and sensed the shift, children always ask the simplest, sharpest question. What did she ask? And how did she respond to Caius's choice?
Elara walked in and froze when she saw us in the living room. She asked if Octavia was gone for good. Caius nodded. Elara crossed the room and hugged him hard, saying she was proud he chose our family. He cried into her hair, trying not to. I held them both, and the house felt quieter, like the tension finally had somewhere else to live. That night, Caius admitted again that he should have defended her when she was 5. He said Octavia raised him to never question her, to keep peace even when peace meant surrender. Watching Elara refuse broke something inside him, something that needed to break. We talked until it was dark, no fixing the past, just naming it. That night, he promised Elara he would never stay silent again, and in that promise, I heard the first true apology, one that doesn't demand forgiveness, only change.
The next morning, Octavia tried to reel him back in, because control hates losing. How did she try? And what did Caius's response reveal?
Octavia called early and kept calling until the ringtone felt like a fist. Caius ignored it. When he answered on speaker, she sobbed, begged, and said she was sorry. He replied calmly, 8 years too late, and hung up. She called back. He let it go. Over the next days, the voicemails shifted from pleading to blame. She accused me of poisoning him, said I was bitter about IVF, insisted she meant well. Caius didn't debate her version anymore. He saved the messages, turned the phone face down, and went to help Elara with homework. He didn't look for approval. He looked at her. That was the new boundary, quiet, stubborn, real. For years, he kept peace by shrinking me and our daughter. Now he kept peace by refusing to be moved. And I learned something. Silence can be surrender, or it can be refusal. This time, it was refusal.
Then Vander jumped in because family pressure loves a chorus. What did he say, and how did you answer without letting their shame script run your house?
Evander called on the 4th day, furious, demanding to know why we were abandoning their mother. Caius tried to explain, starting with Elara's 5th birthday, then years of ignoring her, but Evander cut him off. He waved it away as old people saying dumb things and called us cruel for holding a grudge. That night, I did what I do when fear shows up. I researched. I found assisted living places that accept Medicaid. Clean, safe, structured, with activities. No ocean views, but real care. I sent Caius a list and said, "We're not leaving her to die. We're refusing to sponsor her fantasy." Then I checked on Elara, asleep with her science book open, and I knew we were doing the right thing. Care isn't the same as luxury, and boundaries aren't cruelty. I refused to let their narrative shrink our parenting into revenge.
Octavia's next move was public, because some people don't want resolution, they want an audience. What was her first campaign move, and how did you refuse to fight in her arena?
She went online. Octavia posted an old photo of Caius as a boy beside her and wrote about a son who forgot his mother and a wife who hates family. People from Harrowfin and Cape Orem piled on with prayers and lectures about honoring parents. She never mentioned Elara. She framed it as money, not harm, because harm has receipts and money is rumor. Evander shared it and added that I'd turned Caius against blood. Caius started to type a rebuttal, then stopped and deleted it. He said, "If we argue in her arena, she gets another stage." So we stayed quiet, screenshotted every post and forwarded it to Avery. That night we cooked dinner, helped Elara with homework, and kept her world small and safe. Silence became our shield, not our surrender. And I saw how manipulation works. It turns boundaries into betrayal and then sells it like virtue.
Then came the certified letter, paper that tries to make manipulation look official. What did it demand, and how did you keep Caius from biting the hook?
3 days later, a certified letter arrived from Seacliff Haven residents in Cape Orem. It thanked Mr. and Mrs. Thornfield for sponsoring Octavia's move-in and demanded the remaining deposit by Friday. Octavia had listed Caius as financially responsible, like consent was optional. Paper makes manipulation feel official, and it almost pulled Caius back into his old reflex of obedience. Caius went pale and said maybe we should pay to avoid trouble. I told him, trouble is the hook, paying is the bite. We called the facility, stated we never agreed, and asked for the paperwork. The signature wasn't his. Avery sent a non-liability notice and requested a fraud review. By day's end, Seacliff Haven confirmed in writing that Caius was removed as guarantor and billing would stop. We saved every email in a folder labeled Boundaries. That folder wasn't petty, it was protection. When someone weaponizes institutions, you answer with documentation, not panic.
When you brought in Avery Sablehurst, he reframed it. What did he insist on before anyone talked it out, and why did that change everything?
Avery said, "Stop treating this as a moral debate. Treat it as a boundary case. Step 1, document everything. Posts, voicemails, letters, the forged contract, and the years Elara was excluded. Step 2, move all communication to writing. No calls, no improvising, no late-night arguments. Step 3, send one clear notice to Seacliff Haven that Octavia had no authority to bind us financially and that staff should discuss Medicaid options with her directly." Then he asked, "Is your daughter safe from retaliation?" We set a pickup password at Harrowfin Middle School, updated emergency contacts, and told staff no relatives get information. We created one email address for any contact, and Avery handled responses. He said, "Consistency is protection, emotion is fuel, don't hand them fuel." He reminded Caius that protecting Elara isn't cruelty, it's parenting. Having a written script kept us calm when Octavia tried to improvise, and that calm is what kept her from taking over.
The retaliation you feared wasn't physical, it was reputational, institutional, sneaky. When did that fear turn into a phone call?
I feared she'd target Elara's reputation. A week after Avery's notice, Harrowfin Middle School called. The counselor said an anonymous relative reported Elara was being emotionally abused and isolated from her grandmother. Octavia had dressed control up as concern. I asked for the allegations in writing and scheduled a meeting with the principal. I called Caius at work and said, "This is escalation." That night, Elara saw my face and asked if she'd done something wrong. I said, "No, this is an adult problem." I made sure she heard that twice. The report wasn't about safety, it was about leverage. We gathered our documentation, printed it, and walked into the meeting with calm facts. That's when I understood she'd use systems as leverage, and that meant we had to treat every contact as strategy, not sentiment.
School meetings can feel like trials if parents panic. How did you handle it so Elara didn't feel questioned, like she was on the stand?
I refused to make Elara defend her own childhood. I told the principal, "My daughter will not be interviewed alone for an adult's narrative." Elara stayed in the library with a friend while I met with staff. I spoke as her parent and as a pediatric nurse, calm, factual, no theatrics. I explained the history, Octavia calling her maid in a lab, years of selective gifting, and the forged assisted living contract meant to force payment. Then I requested protections. A pickup password, no release of records, and Octavia's photo on file as a barred contact. The principal agreed, documented it, and thanked me for bringing facts instead of drama. Afterward, I told Elara we handled it, and she never had to answer for Octavia. She exhaled, like a knot loosening. That exhale mattered more than winning an argument. It told her, "Adults will handle adult chaos. You get to be a kid."
A social worker call can scare even good parents because the system is heavy. Did one get involved, and what did it feel like in your body?
Yes. Maliki Risto called to follow up. My voice stayed steady, but my chest felt tight, because even a false report can bruise a family. Maliki was professional, not accusatory. He asked about routines, discipline, and Elara's emotional state. I answered clearly, then disclosed the reporter had a direct financial conflict with us. I offered Avery's documentation, the forged Seacliff Haven contract, screenshots, and saved voicemails. That shifted the tone. Maliki scheduled a brief home visit. He spoke with Elara with me in the room, asked about friends and school, and watched how she relaxed when she talked about science camp. Before he left, he said the report didn't match reality and that the conflict of interest was obvious. The file closed. I felt shaken, but also grateful we stayed calm and documented everything. Fear loves secrecy. We chose light.
The hardest part is what kids absorb. How did you explain the visit so Elara didn't carry shame for an adult's weapon?
I told her the truth without turning it into a horror story. "A social worker's job is to make sure kids are safe," I said. "It's not punishment and you did nothing wrong." Elara asked, "Am I in trouble?" That question hurt more than any voicemail. I said, "No. This is about control, not you." We agreed on boundaries. She could answer simple questions, but she didn't owe anyone her whole history. I let her choose where to sit and whether I stayed nearby. When Maliki visited, Elara talked about dance and science club, and he asked one gentle question. "Do you feel safe at home?" She said yes without hesitating. After he left, we got ice cream, and she told me, "I like that I got to choose." Choice is medicine. It rewires what control tries to steal, and I wanted her body to remember, safety can include her voice.
Then Octavia tried a different weapon, generosity as a hook. What gift arrived, and why did it feel like a trap the moment you touched it?
A thick envelope arrived addressed to Elara in careful handwriting. Inside was a $5,000 check and a letter calling her "my sweet girl," claiming she'd always loved her and saying, "Families shouldn't let pride ruin a child's future." It was a bribe dressed as blessing. Elara held it like it burned and asked, "Is she buying me?" Caius looked sick. I called Avery, who advised returning it by certified mail with one line, "We do not accept gifts or contact." The goal was to avoid arguments about motives. We returned it unopened, with tracking. Elara asked if that was mean. I said, "It's not mean to refuse a hook." Elara watched me seal the envelope, then whispered she felt lighter afterward. That whisper told me we'd done the right thing. Kids don't need grand gestures. They need adults who can spot manipulation and name it calmly.
Octavia didn't handle no like love handles no. What happened after you returned the check, and what did Elara learn from Octavia's reaction?
Octavia left a voicemail that swung between sobbing and rage. She called Elara ungrateful, blamed me for poisoning Caius, and said no real grandmother should be treated this way. Caius didn't delete it. He saved it, forwarded it to Avery, and added it to our file. Elara listened once and said quietly, "That's not love, that's a demand." In therapy, Dr. Celine Markham asked her, "What does love do when you say no?" Elara answered, "It stays." That became our compass. We blocked Octavia's number. Dr. Markham taught her a grounding reset, and Elara chose peace over performance. Watching my daughter name the pattern without rage felt like watching her reclaim her mind. Octavia wanted access, Elara wanted integrity, and integrity for a child is a kind of freedom adults rarely get to witness, unless they fight for it.
Then Octavia escalated to visibility, school pickup, public pressure, a forced moment. Did she show up in person, and how did you keep it from becoming a scene Elara had to wear?
She did. Octavia appeared at Harrowfin Middle School at dismissal, like visibility could force belonging. The front office called because she claimed she was picking up her granddaughter. I drove there with my heart racing and my voice steady. I showed ID, reminded staff she wasn't approved, and asked them to keep Elara inside until I arrived. Octavia clasped her hands, tears ready, and said she just wanted a hug. I said calmly, "You are not permitted contact. Leave now." She refused. The school resource officer arrived, issued a trespass warning, and escorted her off campus. Elara never had to see her. When Elara got in the car, she asked, "Was she trying to make everyone watch?" I said, "Yes, and we won't give her an audience." Elara said, "Thank you for not letting her near me." That thank you wasn't politeness, it was relief. And relief is proof of harm.
After that, you put a formal line in place because boundaries without structure get tested. What legal boundary did you set, and how did it change daily life?
Avery drafted a formal no trespass notice and a written no contact directive for Octavia and Evander. It was clean language. Do not come to our home, Elara's school, or my workplace at Guildmere Medical Plaza. Any attempt will be treated as harassment and trespass. The goal wasn't revenge, it was predictability. Paper means you don't negotiate under adrenaline. Caius changed his number and moved everything to one attorney-monitored email. We updated school records again and added Octavia's photo. We installed a door camera and stopped living like we had to hide. Elara asked if a boundary meant we hated Octavia. I said, "No, it means we love our home enough to protect it." That distinction mattered. It taught Elara that safety can be a loving choice, and it taught Caius that protecting his child isn't disrespect, it's adulthood. Some families confuse obedience with love. We stopped.
Evander's broke after divorce story was convenient, almost too convenient. Where did he really fit, and what did you learn when Avery dug deeper?
It surprised me, but yes. Violetta Crownhill called and apologized for staying quiet. She said she'd watched Octavia punish people with exclusion whenever they didn't obey, and she was tired of pretending it was normal. Violetta offered to help coordinate Medicaid paperwork so the burden wouldn't fall on us. My sister Talia Rennick reminded Caius that protecting Elara wasn't selfish, it was responsible parenting. Friends like Imogen Fairchild and Kiernan Ashby checked in, brought groceries, and stayed for tea so Elara could feel normal. The support wasn't about rescue, it was about being believed. I realized comfort can be one clear sentence. "I see the pattern, and you're not crazy." That sentence lifted the loneliness off my shoulders. Caius slept better that week, too. Manipulation thrives in isolation. Community breaks the spell, and when people finally name the truth out loud, your nervous system stops bracing for disbelief.
In chaos, allies show up or they don't. Did anyone step forward once you shared receipts, and what did it feel like to finally be believed?
It surprised me, but yes. Violetta Crownhill called and apologized for staying quiet. She said she'd watched Octavia punish people with exclusion whenever they didn't obey, and she was tired of pretending it was normal. Violetta offered to help coordinate Medicaid paperwork so the burden wouldn't fall on us. My sister Talia Rennick reminded Caius that protecting Elara wasn't selfish, it was responsible parenting. Friends like Imogen Fairchild and Kiernan Ashby checked in, brought groceries, and stayed for tea so Elara could feel normal. The support wasn't about rescue, it was about being believed. I realized comfort can be one clear sentence. I see the pattern, and you're not crazy. That sentence lifted the loneliness off my shoulders. Caius slept better that week, too. Manipulation thrives in isolation. Community breaks the spell, and when people finally name the truth out loud, your nervous system stops bracing for disbelief.
So, what ultimately happened with Octavia's care? Did she get her ocean view fantasy, or did reality finally hold the pen?
Not Seacliff Haven. Once the residents realized the signature was forged and the family sponsor story wasn't real, they stopped billing us and redirected Octavia toward Medicaid options. With Violetta's help, Octavia applied and moved into a licensed facility that accepted it, still in Cape Aurum, but practical, not glamorous. Octavia called it a nursing home prison. I called it care within her means. She tried to smear us publicly, but the story traveled differently once people understood she attempted fraud and dragged our daughter into it. We sent the administrator her medication history by email, then stepped back and let professionals handle care. That was the line. We won't abandon someone's basic dignity, but we won't finance someone's entitlement. There's a difference between compassion and sponsorship. Octavia wanted sponsorship. Elara deserved compassion. We chose the child.
Even from the facility, people like Octavia still want the last word. Did she try to reach Elara, and how did you enforce the boundary without reopening the wound?
She tried. A staff member called, saying Octavia wanted to send Elara a forgiveness letter. I asked for the administrator and emailed our no-contact directive. I explained respectfully that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a documented pattern of harm. The facility agreed to block outgoing mail to our address and flagged our numbers as do not call. Elara overheard and said, "She still wants the last word." Dr. Celine Markham helped us build a ritual instead. Elara could write anything she wanted, read it once to me, then destroy it. No sending, no bargaining, no reopening. After she tore up the page, we went for a walk, and she said, "No more letters, just my life." That sentence sounded like freedom, and freedom for a kid who once asked if she was fake is holy. We didn't need Octavia's closure. We needed Elara's peace.
Inside your marriage, accountability can be messy, especially when a partner realizes their silence caused harm. What did repair look like for Caius after he finally saw the cost?
Caius hit a hard stretch. He was furious at Octavia, but even more furious at himself for being trained to obey. Some nights he whispered, "I failed Elara," like a prayer he couldn't stop. Dr. Markham helped him separate guilt from responsibility. Guilt says, "I'm bad." Responsibility says, "I did harm and I will repair." Repair looked like this. He apologized to Elara without asking her to comfort him. He showed up at school events he used to avoid, and he corrected relatives when they rewrote the story. He said, "My mother hurt my child. That is the truth." He wrote Octavia one short email, copied to Avery, "Do not contact Elara." In couples sessions, he learned to sit with discomfort instead of escaping into silence. The quiet in our house finally felt chosen, not forced, and I learned to watch actions, not tears, because tears are easy when you're guilty. Change is harder.
When the chaos stopped leaking into daily life, what was the biggest change you noticed in Elara, and why did it feel like her nervous system exhaled?
Her nervous system relaxed. It was subtle at first. She stopped asking who would be at events. She stopped rehearsing polite smiles for adults who didn't deserve them. She laughed louder. She took up space at the dinner table. She invited friends over without checking if our home was okay, like she had believed stability was temporary. Her sleep improved, and the dark circles under her eyes softened. One afternoon, she brought home a genetics project and said, half smiling, "I'm still made of cells, not shame." She laughed at her own joke, then asked if we could visit Suncrest Kingdom someday. Just us? That request told me she finally believed joy was allowed without permission. It felt like color returning to our life. I didn't realize how much we'd been living in grayscale until I saw her stop scanning rooms for danger. Kids shouldn't have to be that alert. She finally wasn't.
Some people worry cutting a relative off teaches kids to abandon people. Did you worry about that? And how did you frame the lesson so Elara's heart stayed open but protected?
I worried about it because I didn't want Elara to learn that love is disposable, so I framed it carefully. We don't step back from people for being imperfect. We step back from people who repeatedly harm and refuse repair. Boundaries aren't the absence of compassion. They're the structure that keeps compassion from becoming self-erasure. I told her, apologies are words, repair is behavior. Dr. Celine Markham reinforced it with a rule. An apology that demands access isn't an apology. It's a negotiation. Elara practiced saying, if she wants closeness, she can show change. That kept her heart open without giving it away. The goal wasn't bitterness, it was discernment. I wanted my daughter to grow into a woman who can forgive without forgetting, and who never confuses family with permission to hurt her. That distinction will save her life more than any lecture.
Looking ahead, because the future is where kids carry these lessons, what do you hope Elara remembers about you and Caius in this chapter?
I hope she remembers that we chose her reality over other people's comfort. I hope she remembers the day she said, "Hello, Mrs. Larkspur," and we didn't punish her honesty. I hope she remembers that when systems got involved, school and social services, we stayed calm and protected her without making her perform for adults. I want her to remember Caius not as the man who froze, but as the man who learned, owned his failure, and grew a spine. And I want her to remember this most. Being born through IVF never made her less real. It made her deeply wanted, and we proved over and over that love is action, not a title someone demands. I want her to remember our home stayed steady, dinners, homework, laughter, and the quiet certainty that she belonged. No matter who tried to dispute it, if she carries that certainty into adulthood, Octavia's sentence will shrink into what it always was, a cruel opinion, not a truth.
If Octavia could hear one final statement from you, not as a fight, but as closing truth, what would you say now that the dust has settled?
I'd say this. You didn't lose Elara because you were confused or old-fashioned. You lost her because you chose cruelty over curiosity and pride over repair. You wanted the title of grandmother without the work of love. You wanted our money without our boundaries. You wanted our daughter's feelings as the price of your comfort. Children grow. They remember. They learn language. Accountability feels like disrespect to people who expect silence. Our door is closed until repair shows up, and repair is behavior over time. And I'll add this, quietly, with no drama, Elara was never made in a lab in the way you meant. She was made in devotion. She was made in persistence. She was made in a love that didn't quit when it got hard. You tried to make her feel unreal. You only proved who was unwilling to be real about themselves, and that truth is the only ending you earned.
Before we wrap, I want to slow down on something. Real? After Octavia's line, what did you do the very next day to rebuild Elara's sense of being real in her body, not just her mind?
The next day I focused on things a child can feel. I made breakfast the way Elara liked it, not to distract her, but to anchor her. I sat beside her while she ate and said, "Your body is real. Your laughter is real. Your tears are real." Then I did something simple. I pulled out her baby book, photos, tiny hospital bracelet, her first handprints. I told her the story of her arrival like it was sacred, not secret. I didn't mention IVF as a debate. I mentioned it as devotion. Later, we went outside and I had her press her palm to mine, feel warmth, feel skin, feel pulse. Kids believe what their senses confirm. That's what Octavia attacked, her sense of belonging in the world. So I rebuilt it with touch, routine, and truth spoken gently. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to re-stitch a child's identity before shame could settle, and I promised myself I'd never let her carry adult cruelty alone again.
People ask, why didn't you confront Octavia earlier? But sometimes confrontation without power just feeds the monster. What kept you from exploding sooner? And what did you learn about timing?
I wanted to explode 100 times, but early on, I didn't have the structure. Caius wasn't ready, and Elara was too small to withstand the fallout. I learned that confrontation without support can become another injury for the child. More tension, more whispers, more adults asking her to be sweet. So I waited, not passively, but strategically. I built proof. I built stability. I built allies. I built my daughter's sense of safety so that if the family turned ugly, she'd still have a home that didn't wobble. Timing matters because power matters. Octavia relied on the idea that we'd rather endure than disrupt. I disrupted when disruption could be contained, when we could document, protect school access, and put legal boundaries in place. I also learned something sobering. Some people interpret your patience as permission, so when I finally spoke, I didn't speak in rage. I spoke in facts. Facts don't flare out and fade, they stay. And staying is what ends cycles.
Let's talk about the selective grandkids dynamic. How did you keep Elara from turning that into self-hatred, like she was missing something?
I refused to let her fill the blank with shame. When she noticed the toys, the praise, the photos she wasn't in, I didn't say, "It's fine." I said, "That's unfair." Naming unfairness gave her a map. The problem was outside her, not inside her. Then I taught her a second map. Unfairness doesn't get to define your worth. We talked about how adults can be biased, cruel, insecure, how a grown-up can punish a child to feel powerful. That honesty protected her from self-blame. I also surrounded her with environments where her effort mattered: dance recitals, science fairs, friendships. Not because achievement proves worth, but because belonging heals worth. When she asked, "Why doesn't she like me?" I said, "It isn't your job to earn love from someone committed to withholding it." That sentence became a boundary inside her. Over time, she stopped chasing the withheld affection and started investing in the love that showed up. That shift kept her heart from turning inward and sour.
When Caius said he didn't want a scene, what did you understand about his childhood, and how did you stop resentment from poisoning your marriage?
I understood Caius was trained. Octavia raised him to equate obedience with goodness. Conflict meant punishment, coldness, guilt, withdrawal. So when he froze, he wasn't choosing Octavia as much as he was choosing the survival strategy she installed. That didn't excuse the damage, but it explained the reflex. To keep resentment from poisoning us, I separated two things: his fear and his responsibility. I could empathize with fear. I would not let fear steer parenting. In couples sessions, we talked about how silence isn't neutral. Silence sides with the aggressor. Caius had to face that without me turning it into a character assassination. I also set a rule. I won't argue with you in front of Elara, and I won't accept you minimizing harm in private. Those two boundaries created pressure, but pressure is what pushes growth. Resentment dissolves when accountability becomes action. The moment Caius began protecting Elara consistently, something in me unclenched. I didn't need perfection. I needed reliability, and he learned to become it.
In your role as a pediatric nurse, you've seen kids carry invisible wounds. What signs did you watch for in Elara that told you this wasn't just a mean grandma comment?
I watched for shifts that look small but change a child's trajectory: sleep changes, appetite changes, sudden perfectionism, people-pleasing, flinching at certain words, the way they scan rooms before they speak. After that birthday, Elara became easy. Too easy. She stopped asking for things in group settings. She'd say she didn't want candy even when her eyes followed it. She'd volunteer to clean up, like usefulness could earn safety. That's not maturity, that's adaptation to emotional risk. The biggest sign was how she questioned reality. Am I fake? Do you love each other? That's existential for a 5-year-old. Kids should be worrying about cartoons, not legitimacy. I also noticed the freeze when Grandma came up. Her body would pause before her face did. The nervous system tells the truth first. That's why I treated Octavia's words as harm, not drama. If someone can alter a child's sense of being real, that's not a comment. That's a wound, and wounds need care, not denial.
When you started documenting receipts, screenshots, timelines, did you ever worry it made you too much? And how did you reframe that instinct in yourself?
I worried because women are trained to fear being labeled dramatic, but I reframed it as this: documentation isn't drama, it's clarity. When someone rewrites history, your memory becomes the battleground. Receipts take the battle off your nervous system and put it on paper. I also reminded myself I wasn't collecting evidence to punish Octavia, I was collecting evidence to protect Elara. That makes it clean. You can survive a lot of insults as an adult. Your child shouldn't have to survive a family's denial. The timeline helped me see patterns instead of isolated incidents. It also helped Caius because he couldn't hide behind "she didn't mean it" once he saw a decade of omission lined up like a ledger. The receipts weren't about winning, they were about ending confusion, because confusion is where manipulation lives. Once I stopped apologizing for clarity, I felt steadier. Too much is what people call you when you stop being easy to exploit.
Finally, if you could hand another parent one lesson from this, the kind that fits in a pocket when family pressure gets loud, what would it be? After the no contact directive, what did normal look like again? And what tiny daily rituals helped your family feel like a family, not a crisis unit?
Normal looked boring, and I loved it. Dinner at the same time, homework at the kitchen table, a show we watched together on Friday nights, weekend errands that didn't feel like escape routes. We made quiet wins visible. Elara choosing what music to play, Caius showing up to her school event without scanning for threats, me leaving my phone in another room for an hour. We also created rituals of safety. A code word Elara could use if she felt uncomfortable anywhere, a standing Sunday call with my parents, a reset walk after anything stressful. Therapy gave Elara tools, but rituals gave her body repetition, proof that peace can be predictable. Caius and I started doing short check-ins. Any contact today? Any stress points? Anything we need to adjust? That kept fear from becoming background noise. And we celebrated boundaries like achievements, because for our family, they were. Not grand celebrations, just a simple, "we handled that well." Over time, the story stopped being about Octavia. It became about us. That's the point. Boundaries aren't a war, they're a way back to your own life. I'd rather be too much than be the reason my child learns to tolerate harm. I'd say protect the smallest person first, even if the loudest adults call you cruel. Family pressure often demands you sacrifice a child's comfort to preserve an adult's image. Don't do it. Also, never debate your child's worth. State it. You are real, you are wanted, you belong. And when manipulation escalates, don't respond with chaos. Respond with structure. Document, write, set boundaries, involve professionals. Love without boundaries becomes a donation to someone else's dysfunction. Boundaries with compassion become protection. And one more thing, don't wait for the perfect moment to defend your child. Defense is built in daily choices: who gets access, what gets excused, what gets named. Caius learned that too late, but he still learned. Your child doesn't need a perfect family. They need adults brave enough to tell the truth and keep it steady. That's what heals. Not apologies, not titles. Behavior, repeated.
Thank you for trusting me with Emera and Elara's story. If this hit a nerve, if you've ever watched family ask a child to stay small, to keep adults comfortable, remember, boundaries aren't cruelty, they're protection. If you want more stories like this, with real receipts, real consequences, and real healing, follow Broken Relationship Tales.